Katie, are we ready to go?
Yes, Madam President. Anytime you're ready to go, as long as your board members are there and ready, we should be ready.
Do you have an update on Andy? Because I don't see him.
I do not. Let me try and get a hold of him.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and kick it off, and then when he joins in, I will note his presence. But board members, Donnelly and Mitchell, if you guys can both turn your videos on so I have you as part of the screen as well, that'd be fantastic.
Did you get a haircut, Margot? I can't hear you.
No, I just turned it under instead of flipping it up.
Okay. Hi, Dina.
All right. Okay, here we go. It is 3:04 on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. I'm going to call to order the work session of the Anchorage School District. In the boardroom, I have board member Marcette, myself, President Michaelis, Hildy with me. On Zoom, I have board member Bellamy, board member Donnelly, and board member Mitchell. I have not heard from board member Holloman. If he joins in, I will make sure to note it for the record. Dave, member Donnelly, if you can turn your video on, that would be fantastic so we can also see you as well. So we all have a work session agenda. The big topic for today is the budget. I am going to kind of tag team with board member Marcette, who is the chair of the finance committee. We also have in the room with us our CFO, Jim Anderson. Thank you. And we're just going to kind of work our way down and just have a preliminary conversation to the budget.
So I actually misspoke on the video. I know member Donnelly has to work, so you can phone into these. So if he doesn't have video, that's okay in this meeting. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise.
All right, thank you. All right.
I just tried to activate my video and I got a grayish.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing here too. We can help get you some tech support in between meetings, but thank you for trying. And then Mr. Anderson, are you the only one who's going to be here helping facilitate this discussion, or will we have? Okay, all right. So Star, would you like to kick us off and just kind of bring the board back into, where we are kind of with the budget and the process and some of the timeline stuff and some of the things that have been brought up in the finance committee so that we can just kind of get ourselves grounded and kick off this discussion. And don't forget to use your mic. Thank you.
Of course. I thought it was important that we talk about the process and the timeline because board members have asked us to extend this. And the only way we can really extend this is we can start talking about the process early because we don't have the pro forma, which the pro forma provides the board an estimate for deficit or surplus for the following year. It's based on projected student enrollment and retention of current metrics, PTR, and special programs. And at the conclusion of the pro forma brief, the board provides the final guidance for budget development. We could actually provide that guidance ahead of time if we focus on our goals, which is where our budget is supposed to be. So we don't have that option because the pro forma is given to us, I believe, did I see it in here? The first, is that December that we received that pro forma, Mr. Anderson? Right. Your mic's not on. No. No.
How about now? Ooh.
There we go.
To remember Marcette, that is correct. We will have the pro forma in the first board meeting in December for non-action. And then, of course, for final comments on the second board meeting in December.
Okay. And then we do have to have it to the municipality by that 24th of February, correct?
That's correct. We have to, by charter, we have to have it by the first Monday in March. But the first Monday in March this year is March the 1st. So we have to get it to the municipality in time for them to prep it for the assembly meeting for a non-action on 1 March.
So I guess by restating this, I just want to let the board know that we're starting the discussion early, but there's not necessarily all that time to, if you don't like what the district is proposing to us, they do come forward with a, what are their second and third choices that they have discussed if the board doesn't like the proposed first amendments or to the budget to be able to support our goals. There are always others that they bring with them. What we're trying to alleviate is the need for board members to go through the budget line by line and pick out what they think is important. It's not about our own priorities. It's about the priorities we've set as a board for the goals. And, we have made this commitment that we have spent lots of time on these goals and these guardrails, and we need to be committed to supporting and kind of putting our money where our mouth is, I guess, or however that saying goes. And the way we support these is through our budget. So in talking about this, we will be talking, even now, it would be helpful to talk about maybe some of the things, how we want to support our diversity that we have in our guardrails, our mental health. And the other thing we might want to do is pick priorities for the first year, because we can't, with our budget, we might not be able to support everything the first year, but what's our priorities, where we want to put our money to begin with? Do we want to put a little bit of money on everything? Do we want to focus money on a certain guardrail or goal to begin with? So.
Board Member Hildy?
Thank you. And I think that's really important to talk about because we can't do all of them, especially in this craziness. But when we do our annual goals, the superintendent brings those forward to say, here's the piece of that I think we can focus on this year to, in the big picture, get the most progress toward the goals. That's where the proposed budget comes in. So what I'm really looking for in this discussion is our commitment to saying, to the process really, to say, we are really serious about our goals and communicating that clearly to the superintendent so that she and her team can then go and say, here's what you've asked for, here's what makes sense for the biggest bang for your buck toward achieving your goals. So I wouldn't want to choose our narrow those priorities down on our end. We haven't quite set, but we've almost set our goals. But let's say we set our goals and then she and her team with their expertise in education say, here's what makes the most sense with what we have, and COVID on top of that, frankly.
Just wanted to point out quick for the record, I do have Member Holloman that has joined us on Zoom as Superintendent. Dina Bishop is also with us as well. And I know you're not signed into Zoom, but I can see hands up here. So I've got Board Member Bellamy, you are up next, and then Board Member Merced.
Thank you, Madam President. So the one thing that I'd like to, I agree with everything Member Hildy said. The piece I think that's missing for me in terms of a final priority would be the community input piece. And I know that we are going to start that process tomorrow or sometime real soon. But I do think our commitment to our goals, I mean, we can't keep, I would not want to see us going back and forth. I also think that whatever guidance we give to the superintendent needs to be, need to stand by that guidance. But the only piece that I would want to, aside from our discussion today, I would really want to spend some time at some point looking at and considering what the community's input would be. And that's all I wanted to say.
All right, and Dr. Bishop, you had a...
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you just to clarify. So the community input on the budget itself, to those things that Member Marcet mentioned, like what should we focus on first? Because certainly my understanding is the community input continues on the strategic plan, and there's a plan
that
for
is
that.
Correct.
And then like to clarify what we think the community thinks we should start on first. Is that kind of where?
So just to, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just that, and that's, I need to clarify. I'm talking about community's input on our goals. I really would like to see the input on our strategic plan. That's a great clarification. Thank you, Dr. Bishop.
Member Marset?
So I will disagree a little bit what Ms. Hildy said. I do believe it is the board's responsibility to focus on our goals and which are a priority. Then we give those, that's our direction. And based on that direction, then Dr. Bishop and her staff would come back and say how they would work to accomplish the goals, the board's priority. So out of those 3 goals, out of those guardrails, we as a board have to give them direction. And in that direction, it would be which ones do we feel should be the most important to implement immediately or within the next year.
Member Hildy?
So when we do our superintendent evaluation timeline, Member Mitchell and I went through a lot of processes on, what does it look like? In the annual, what are we going to do this year? And what we went through governance is saying, Dr. Bishop, here are the goals we have for 5 years or 6 years. Each year she comes back and says, here's what I'm going to work on for my evaluation, which is the accountability measure. And she says, okay, we're going to make this much progress in reading, or because of COVID, we're not even going to touch that high school stuff or, something like that. She brings that forward. And then as a board, we have to say yay or nay on that. But the drafting part of it starts at her end based on our big, broad objective of goals. And then we say, yes, that's cool. That sounds good. Or no, we're really not feeling that. We were thinking more, let's focus on high school because of our community feedback or because of what we know about the needs of our community or values. But where the starting point is, I think, is different.
Member Marset?
And again, I disagree with that. Sorry. I do feel if you look at anything with our goals and our guardrails, it is the board who gives the direction. And then Dr. Bishop comes back and tells us, yes, I can do this. No, I can't do this. She can advise us. We can change that based on the information that we get from Dr. Bishop. But in all cases, it's up to the board to give that direction to the superintendent on where we'd like to go with those.
So I'll ask a question, and this is a hypothetical that has zero meaning other than to use it as an example. So if the board were to say, we want to cut student nutrition to 7th graders.
No.
So that would be part of our board conversation. That's not a part of our goals and guardrails. And so it has, are we as a board going to stand up and say, it's not part of our goals and guardrails, therefore that is not going to be anything that gets forwarded on. And so to some extent, our scope as a board is going to be that's our lane that we're kind of working our way down. And yes, I agree with Member Bellamy's point to make sure that we're getting our feedback from the community,
right?
And that we have our final adoption of our goals and guardrails, before we get too far, deep and down that. But once we have that solidified, that's our path, right? That's where we go. Is the question going to be how deep into the goal? I mean, are we trying to help Dr. Bishop prioritize, some of the interim, spending of it? Or are we going to keep at the higher level goals and guardrails, design the budget around the goals and guardrails? And so it's getting that board commitment that that's where we're at. And that's Member Marset.
So the goal here, I hope, is that we're not going to get into basically a line item veto. We are not the experts to come forward and say, hey, we don't like that you're going to restructure Ignite and the health program, so we think you should do this. That's what we do. We give it back to the superintendent. We say, are there other options that you can present to us that we can take a look at? But we as a board do not have that expertise or that knowledge to go through the budget line by line and pick out the things that we think are most important. You have to look at the big picture. And so that is the job of the superintendent and her staff. And so what we have to do, and just like I tried to do last year, is I have the budget down because of the way the process was. And that's what we have to be willing to do, is not say, nope, I don't like this. No, you're not going to do this. Yes, you're going to do this. You're going to say, I don't like what you've proposed to us. Is there a plan B, or are there other options we can look at? And the superintendent will say, we looked at it. Here's maybe, I talked to Jim Anderson. There's always maybe a couple of things that there might be 1, 2, and 3, and then 4, 5, and 6 that they've talked about. And they might be willing to share the 5, 6, and 7 with us as alternates. But it is not our job to say how it's going to be obtained.
I've got 2 in the queue on Zoom real quick. So I'm going to go Member Donnelly, Member Bellamy, and then Member Hildy. Member Donnelly, you're up.
Well, I just respectfully disagree that should be our goal. I believe each individual member has the right to propose amendments to the budget. And if the board doesn't like those amendments, the board can vote them down. And I don't think it's appropriate to prevent individuals from making amendments to any motion that's before the board. And the budget is simply a motion. So you would have to amend the rules somehow to preempt the franchise for individual board members. I don't think that's appropriate. I just disagree with this process.
And so as a reminder, Member Donnelly, right now, this is a discussion on, process. We don't have anything in board policy at this point either way. And so this is just a discussion to see, how the board feels about it. And so thank you for sharing your comments. And Board Member Bellamy.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that this board follows Robert's Rules of Order. And so I think while there is some disagreement, I think if we look to Robert's Rules of Order, we will find our way through both Member Marsette's opinion as well as Member Donnelly's. So I think we do bring a different lens to this, but I think the structure that we govern ourselves according to allows us to work through both members' viewpoints.
And
I just hate to see us get bogged down on what we can and cannot do when we have a structure in place that guide us.
And that's correct. Robert's Rules guides how we work our way through motions and amendments and stuff like that. But on top of that is our policy. But because board policy doesn't have anything specific to that, it is the current status quo of what we do have. And, Robert's Rules does guide us through that. Member Hildy?
Thank you. Well, I already really appreciate this discussion. I already feel like, oh, okay, some clarity to some things and what was the problem last year. So I think this is already very good.
Mm-hmm.
I remember last year, the concern was we didn't get time for the community to hear the budget or for us to really spend time thinking about it. And we're already doing that. So that's very good. I think for what Margot said, we do have a process. Your board policy can supersede Robert's Rules if we choose to do that, or we can choose to govern our own behavior and not second things or not vote for things. So that's a choice we might discuss now or later. I don't know. I like the, so here's my concern I have, with the example Member Marcette brought up, Ignite and health stuff. So what is our plan for processing that? So we're going to go through this. We're going to talk through all of that. And then Dr. Bishop's going to suggest a budget. And there's going to be parts of the budget we don't like, and there's going to be parts of the budget the people who lost their thing that they care deeply about and are awesome at don't like. What is our plan for having time to talk about that, for knowing, giving, like she said, clear direction to Dr. Bishop in the first place so that their team isn't doing work twice? So that's what I'm interested in hearing from other board members, I guess.
I've got Member Holloman, and then you are up next, Member Marcette. Even though you're off mute, we can't hear you, Andy.
Does this sound more clear to everybody?
Now you're working. Okay.
I was trying something I had hoped would work better. I think the process that we have works, and part of it is that there's one option. Ignite is kind of a good one to revolve around, in that it was proposed to be cut or restructured, and it caused a real outcry from the community. There were a lot of people in the program, a lot of people that came through the program that felt strongly enough to come talk about it. And I think listening to that and reacting to that is properly the role of the school board. And if 2 or 3 people had decided, gosh, Ignite's really important, we can't let it go, but 4 of us didn't, then the budget would have gone ahead as it was proposed by the administration. There is that third option where we turned to the superintendent and said, well, don't go rework your budget, but we'll reach into reserves. We'll look at budget reserves or fund balance or somewhere, and we're willing to take a little bit more of a chance with our budget in the future in order to keep this program around as part of our program for another year. The problem I have is that if we structure ourselves to where it's harder to make those very direct interventions, we kind of hand the budget back to the superintendent and go, well, no, this isn't really it. See if you can do better, without giving real explicit feedback. I think it's reasonable to put it to a board member that if you really feel strongly and you think $10 million needs to be spent here, you do need to say where that $10 million comes from. And of course, fund balance is a great one. But someone would have to do a little bit of research and be willing to say, well, I think we need to cut the music program. I think that actually has a more restraining effect than, say, policy that limits what we can do. I think we should be able to talk directly about the specific programs that matter or don't matter, and give that direction. And I think all of us recognize that if we do something that causes the budget to have to be rewritten, that's asking a lot. That's not a trivial action on our part. That's a huge lift. And I think we're hesitant to do it unless we have something real direct to give to the superintendent for direction.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Bishop?
I really appreciate all the discussion, and I just want to share, and I think this is where the crux of it's coming to, that when we do respond to, say, whoever's in the room, the guardrail of equity and your outcomes then is determined, then that might come into conflict with that. If we provide additional data, the equity of access even to the gifted program, Member Bellamy, you probably have some good data on that in regard to studying of the equity of access to programming, and part of our AP things and equity of opportunities, what we're working on. But from the get-go, those groups, if you will, of competing interests don't have, I would say, similar voice in the audience. So that would technically, I would just demonstrate, be in high conflict with some of the guardrails that the board has requested. And so I just want to, I don't have an opinion about it. I'm just posing the difficulty of saying you want this, but doing something else in response. And I don't have an answer to fix it. I just want to let you know it's going to come down to those long, difficult discussions again about what do we stand for, this or that? And then we will respond.
And Member Marset?
And I think you have to remember, no matter what we cut, let's say we were going to cut hockey. My gosh, this room would be full. We would have a lot more people than we did on Ignite in here testifying. And I think, it's not that we don't want to listen to individuals, but I think if we have voted and said, this is where we want to put our money, this is what we want to support, And if Dr. Bishop comes with something that says, this is the way I can do this, and we're not in agreement with that, I don't think we get to say, vote to keep that in necessarily, but we need to give it back to Dr. Bishop and her staff to bring us an alternative based on the direction that we've given her. I don't think that the board should be the one to say, well, I've listened to all this, and you know what, we're just going to vote it in and keep Ignite, and we'll do it for a year or whatever. That defeats the purpose of our goals and our guardrails. We give it back to Dr. Bishop, and we say, is there something else we can do besides this? Because this seems to be, I feel like this is very important.
Member Hildy and then Member Bellamy.
And my question for that one, because I agree with that part of it, but then you run into like a timeline issue, right? Okay, so Ignite came out and is there anything else? Because she's always going to give us the best, right? Okay, well, come back with your second best. Well, now maybe it's something in SPED. Okay, but we still got a budget that's due, right? So, but okay, now the SPED people came and said, don't cut us. Don't you care about kids with special needs? Okay, so now we say, give us your third best. But, you know, then somebody is going to lose in this process, and that person, like whose voice matters more and whose interest matters more? How do we define that? It's through our goals and guardrails. And that if we're starting with that, then what Dr. Bishop presents to us should be the optimal outcome. Because there is not going to be anybody we can't make everybody win. There will be, you know, if we're going to improve something somewhere, it's going to come at somebody else's expense. There isn't a magic pot of money, and even if there were, there's still only so many people and so many things, you know. I'll ramble.
Member Bellamy.
Thank you. I appreciate that we are thinking optimistically right in the middle of a pandemic. The reality is, though, guys, there are going to be new costs, unusual costs. The way we do business is going to change. We're thinking optimistically, and I appreciate that. But the reality is, when the rubber hits the road, or whatever analogy you want to use, we will have a lower enrollment. We've got to think about our staffing. We've got to think about the bare minimums that it takes for us to keep schools going. And I just think that being optimistic is great, but this is not going to be a year like any other we've ever had to build a budget around. I really don't think it is. So I would just caution us to think about the past, but really project into the future, because I think that is going to really drive the reality of those costs of this new world that we have to establish for learning. That's what's going to drive our costs.
Member Marset.
So thank you, Ms. Bellamy. I would agree with that, you know, even though we look like we may get more stimulus or CARES funding or whatever, we have no idea what that'll be, what strings will be tied to it, how we can use it. And right now, I think with our current budget, without getting those funds, we may be looking into dipping into a reserve anyway. We just have to wait and see. The pro forma tells us a lot. And I agree with you. It's going to be a tough year for education and for a lot of others. So, but besides that, I mean, those are all things we'll deal with when we're actually looking at the budget. I just think it's important that we have taken a lot of time to do these guardrails and these goals. And if they weren't important, if this isn't what we thought was most important to our students, then why are we spending the time to do it and not willing to fund it? So I think that's the bottom line.
Member Hildy.
I don't know if this is like the right time but since we're just talking, I'm just gonna throw my ideas out. So, you know, we're doing our goals and guardrails, and Margot said, you know, this is a crazy budget year, like there's weird stuff. How open are we to weird? How open are we to like real, you know, innovative solutions? that are going to look different than school in the last few years. Is that something, I feel like we need to communicate that. If we're saying make it mostly like it was 2 years ago, that's a very different direction to really let's achieve these goals. You know, are we really willing to say we could probably handle some shake up on how we deliver things? If it's going to, you know, for a purpose, not just to change things, but, you know, if it's really going to meet equity goals, if it's really going to get reading scores, you know, where we want children to be. So that's what I'm putting a feel out for.
I'm just is there anybody, you know, on the board right now that does not agree that the budget should be, you know, primarily, and its first order of business is to be designed around our upcoming goals and guardrails? I'm not seeing any opposition, and that's
a good agreement.
I would put in the goals and guardrails are things in particular that we're focused on. I mean, we do a lot every day. We transport kids safely. We feed them in a normal year. We educate them on a broad range. The goals and guardrails really go to where we feel like we're not performing as well as we should and we need to improve. So our budget encompasses everything.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say built around it, it certainly has to be built to allow the superintendent and our staff to focus on particular things. That latitude has to be there. But I don't think of the budget as being built around it exclusively. The budget's there to keep the whole district function. And it's a big district that does a lot of different things. So the goals and rails, I think, are a particular area we want to see improvement, but we have to do all the other stuff too.
I agree. I didn't want that to be misconstrued that way, but I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Member Holloman. Member Donnelly, you're next up in the queue.
Unmute. Okay. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Holloman, Member Holloman. I'm always concerned when a general goal adopted by a majority then becomes somehow a absolute for everybody to support. I mean, I'm very concerned with minority rights in the legislative process. And you don't find that anywhere else in government, that the majority adopts a goal, but then the minority is prohibited from disagreeing with being implemented. I don't think that's the way it's supposed to work. I think the minority is supposed to be free to propose alternatives, and that creates a good public discussion, and that debate is very healthy for the eventual outcome of public policy.
Are there any other thoughts from board members? Member Marset?
So I agree that we have a whole district to run and that our budget is there to support the operations of our district. But it is the board's responsibility to give the superintendent direction on where is our focus for the school year. Yes, we have a budget for special education. We have a budget for Title VII. Everyone has a budget. But when we talk about reading, how are we going to do that? Is it going to be, you know, we have our guardrails for equity and diversity and mental health. How does the superintendent know that the board's priority is third grade reading with these guardrails? If we go way over here and say, well, you know, that's important, but you know, this is operational and we want to keep that too. So, and it's kind of hard how to say this, but if we don't, I mean, we have spent time on this and said, most important thing, number one goal is reading. And if we're not willing to tell the superintendent that that's where the money needs to go. And we have to take money from somewhere else because we're going to focus on that goal. We're going to give it more resources. We're going to do everything we can to get that reading up. And we've set an aggressive goal. And then we say, well, you know what? This over here, we need this too, because this is operational and it's, something we do on a daily basis and we have to do it. I'm not saying that that's not important, but I'm just saying that we're sending the superintendent mixed messages, and how can her staff say, hey, we've given you objectives. We've told you how we're going to be able to meet these goals. And we're saying, yeah, you know what? We voted on that. They're important, but guess what? Now we think this over here is more important.
Got Member Bellamy, then Member Hildy, and then Member Mitchell. You're on mute, Miss Smith.
Sorry. Thank you. I guess I want to hear from I want to hear from Dr. Bishop how to best give her what would give her the guidance that she needs. And I would like to hear the same thing from Jim Anderson, because it just seems to me that we're talking. We need to give the guidance, yes, and yes, reading is at the top of my list. I think it's at the top of everybody's list. But aside from just saying focus on reading, what is it that's not in the guardrails already that Dr. Bishop needs from us?
Thank you, Member Bellamy. And I wouldn't necessarily think it's what's in the guardrails or not. It's really being forthright about the outcomes that the board desires. So, different example, and we can share our health teachers. There was a plan, we ended up utilizing funds from the CARES money to fund health teachers. But if we look back, would health teachers have helped us better being classroom teachers, lowering class sizes? Or just the FTE, because health teachers are teachers. So would that have been beneficial to have the health teachers lower class sizes at schools? So we're just looking at alternate use of effectiveness of our resources. Could our FTE have been better served in responding, not necessarily teaching health, but responding to health and mental health? Mm-hmm. Would the best use of $3.5 million have been to put in additional resources into or other schools that to meet equity outcomes? So it's not just, well, we have this reading goal, let's put more reading into reading. It might have been, let's utilize the 40 FTE that we have to place to really where we're finding where reading isn't happening, to put an extra teacher to lower class sizes to really focus and get that job done. So there's a multitude of things that actually can happen, but it's the ability for me speaking, the team of principals, the team here, to be able to implement the best practices that we're guided with research. And we can go all the way back to the reading wars. And consequently, I've shared with delight that the reading wars have finally been subsided, that wow. And I'm so happy that the board supported a science-based research program. Otherwise, that would have been a huge, step in the wrong direction with resources anyway. But it's the guidance, I think, is there. It's saying these are the goals we want to happen. And you might not agree with how it's happened, but then you would have to then say, okay, then you're not accountable for this. We didn't really mean this. That's what would help me. That if you had these goals and had these expectations, but didn't support the work around it, then is it fair to continue to have those expectations? Mm-hmm. Either way, just be fair about it and honest and open and transparent to our community. That's what would give me guidance. And to your point, I also want to say, Member Bellamy, because of the pandemic, it's also going to be realistic about what it is we can and can't do. So I appreciate, you bringing that up because of expenses. There might not even be, it might just be we have to do this because this is the only money we have and the only resources we have because we're fewer students in the district. So there might even be choices that are forced choices due to the situation we're in, I think, in regard to that pandemic. So I hope that helps. And I think, we don't have a goal here to meet like student outcomes and everything contrary to what our community's values are. We pay attention to every staff meeting. I pay attention to what board members say. That's how we're listening all the time to help create that. So on Jim, I'll just pass it to you to kind of fill in the blanks maybe.
Thanks, Dr. Bishop. As Member Bellamy alluded to, we do anticipate having less money next year. For the last 4 years, we've been talking about flat budgets and how a flat budget is automatically a deficit in any way you look at it, just because of inflationary drivers. But this year, it's a very real scenario and a very believable scenario that we're going to have even less students next year. And Andy and I are working on that projection over the next week or two with a number of people around the community to try to narrow down what we believe is most likely. It really does help us the most if we know going in what the priorities are, if it's goals and guardrails or if it's programs, or if there's something that just can't be touched. And we know ahead of time that no matter what, you can't touch this, even if it's not associated, then that would be helpful. But I understand the process and how it really works and the pressure board members are under. So it really is, if we understand your priorities, we apply the resources to it. And when we run out of resources, then we have to make the best with what we have and headed towards those priorities.
So to clarify, right now our understanding is that the priorities are your goals.
Mm-hmm.
And if that changes, we would just want to know.
Right.
Member
Okay.
Hildy, then Member Mitchell.
I can't remember what I was going to say, but I can have a new thought. I would invite the superintendent to remind us if we stray from that. This discussion today, if our priority we're saying is goals and guardrails, and then we get upset about a program that gets cut, it is appropriate for you to say, well, this is what you directed me, and I didn't, and we as board hold each other accountable for doing what we said we wanted to do. So being really clear in this discussion is one of the benefits I think of this discussion, is that I'm hearing what you all think and working those thoughts out together. I hope will strengthen us when we get to this very hard decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Member Mitchell.
Thank you. So I guess, I hear what Member Marcet is saying about when we get the recommendation, it's the best, it's what the administration views as the best alternative given the parameters that they assume they're working under. And this is such a huge organization with so many complexities, and there are so many moving parts. And we have our goals and guardrails, but I certainly would hope that in addition to those things, there are also things that are implicit, like, I think the reason that many of us felt so strongly about the Ignite program is engaging every student. And if we have kids who really do have special needs because they are so much, their way of learning is so different from the average kid in their classroom, we need to make sure that they stay engaged and don't get bored, because we know that our high achieving students are just as at risk of suicide and checking out and not graduating as our kids who aren't proficient. So I think, I don't know how to really, I know Dr. Bishop, you do all this stuff. Obviously, every educator wants to make sure that their students are engaged and, getting appropriate material that excites their love of learning. And there are many, many different ways to slice the budget in an organization this large. So I don't know if there's a way without making the process unmanageable to be able to graft the board, because I think the issue is, we at the end of the process last time, and I understand timing is always going to be an issue. At the end of the process, we were told, we would be restructuring Ignite. It would be absorbing health into the classroom, or the other alternative is increased class size. And, there's probably 20 other alternatives really, but that would require, obviously there's a lot of work that goes into the final recommendation that you bring to us. I understand that. And I don't know if there is a way to telegraph so that if you find out that, this one thing absolutely is not going to fly, to Mr. Anderson's point, the board hadn't really thought about it, but oh man, that is a sacred cow, that we can tell you before that 11th and 3/4 hour. And then the other thing I wanted to say is to Member Hildy's question about whether we are open to innovation, really out of the box thinking. I think Dr. Bishop mentioned a few months ago that the silver lining, if there is one at all in this pandemic, is that it might bring about some really disruptive changes that we wouldn't have been able to do to initiate otherwise. And certainly there is so much learning that has happened among our teachers and our buildings, and I'm sure at the district level, about how technology really can be harnessed, the downsides of it, how it doesn't work, but also ways in which it has really worked spectacularly. When I've been in, 8 elementary schools over the past 4 days, and I've been looking at different things that different teachers have done with their online, it's really been exciting. And they are engaging students in really unique ways. So I personally, speaking as one of 7, I bring it on. I'm really, really open to ideas that we would not have been able to get to had this not happened. Let's take advantage of our lining.
Dr. Bishop.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I believe what was presented, highly gifted would remain the same, just to use this example. And then the Ignite program, it was to look at it a different way and try to be outside of the box and meet those goals. And we ended up in the same place simply due to that, who shows up in the room. And so, again, it can go back to the discussions we've had through your work sessions over and over and over again. And we're just going to do the work. But the point is that we talk about goals and we talk about equity and we talk about the achievement. But the way that we make decisions, how we've always made them, really causes challenges for the students that we have presented in front of us. How we did something 30 years ago when our population and demographics look very different than it does today, we need to take a new approach. And I will share the difficulty in taking a new approach when you're not supported by the school board. It's very difficult. It doesn't generally happen in short of a pandemic. So, but even the things that we did ask to change are moving along well, and people are happy. We continue to have over 3,000 people in the virtual school. We continue to, we doubled the size of the middle college. King Tech is bringing in more money than ever. A lot of the changes that were fraught with discomfort actually have brought revenue to the district and opportunity to the district. And the point in this is that if there is action to change something, I'm just saying, let's just be very transparent about it. If that's the action that we take at the board level through Robert's rules, let's be transparent about, we took this action and then we're not really going to be accountable to these things. And then I give you another plan about, okay, this is how we could be accountable at this level. But we just have to work together in understanding everything that's on the table.
Mm-hmm.
To both sides.
Mm-hmm. Member Hildy?
I just have a question for Dr. Bishop. If, you talk to superintendents around the country and other districts you've been in, what is the process? How does it compare, particularly from the community feedback part of that, in our responsiveness and making sure all voices are heard even if they're not in the room or able to share their voice.
Certainly public meetings are here, and you know from your folks who listen to say, what is it that we need? You're elected officials, and I believe that your goals and guardrails were set for children. And a lot of times what we respond to is just these kids or those kids or those kids because we want to, because we don't. Like when people testify, you feel the hurt because of your point of losing something or gaining something. But just offering something new is just so scary that it's difficult. And so my colleagues who generally are the Council of Great City School, they work with their boards. The trickiest part is when we vacillate on what we want. And when we vacillate on what we want, then you don't really get anything everything is just halfway done then. And that's the most difficult piece of as far as superintendents, that when it changes mid-course. And I get that it does need to change sometimes. If that's the will of the body and they vote that'll be the will of the body to vote that way. But we have to be transparent about what we did to the public then, and be transparent that, okay, since we did this is the cause of it. This was the effect of it. And we just need to continue that communication, because I don't think it'll stop. It takes a commitment from everyone. And in the trainings, and what I'm hearing is that not everyone's on the same page. And so if we do have the votes to do one way or another, just realize that for the district to move forward, there are some things that will have to change. We can't afford to keep doing what we're doing and make the gains. We've demonstrated over the years that the gains come too far and few between by doing it the same way. But it will hurt. It will have hard discussions. And I just want it to be clear about the board's expectations.
Member Bellamy.
So thank you, Dr. Bishop and Mr. Anderson, because that does help. Is it possible, Madam Chair, for us to just do I wish we could do a Mentigram or a Menti, one of those Menti graphs where we just kind of impose all of our hopes onto into one thing, and we can kind of see where everybody's at. But I'm wondering if it might help us if we, I think we all embrace our goals and our guardrails. One of the things that's important to me, Member Hildy has already spoken to it, so has Member Mitchell, is giving ourselves, the board, permission to be to accept that things might look different. So allowing for creativity, flexibility, innovation. So for me, those things would be important in the context of our goals and guardrails. So if we could maybe do a round of that kind of thing, and try to see where people are in terms of, the guidance that they want, the one or two things that's really important for them as we start this process. And we've heard some, all right, but for me, it would be being innovative, allowing the staff to be creative. And I think part of what happened last year, and that was my first board budget process, is that it was clear to me that things weren't going away, but it wasn't clear to other people that what the new gifted program would look like, what the new health education program would look like. And so I think that caused, because we did not understand that, we were confused. And when we're confused, then we tend to do things more reactively, at least I think. So for me, my guidance right now is for us as a board to allow the staff, within the context of a flat budget or a less money, lower enrollment, within the context of our guardrails, that the staff have some room to be creative, to be innovative, and to seek out ways to deliver instruction that we need to maybe consider. So I don't know if it would be helpful for other people to share what their it's not about line items for me. It's about how we shape our brain around this opportunity, because it really is an opportunity for us to do things a little hopefully better for kids and families and for our staff.
Member Marset?
So one thing I want to remind the board that these goals and guardrails are not just what we value, but what our community values. We went out to the community and we said, what do you value? And this is what they came back with. And
right.
So it's just not a priority with us. It's a priority with our community and what they want. The other thing I would say is, I think Dr. Bishop and her staff did exactly what you said, Ms. Bellamy. They came back with innovative ways to keep programs. And yet what happened is, and I'm going to be very blunt here, is teachers showed up. They didn't like what was going to happen, and they were very vocal about it. And the assembly got involved, and they started having meetings and calling public, health nurses in, and it swayed a lot of board members. Instead of sticking to what was probably an innovative idea and giving it a chance, we just said, nope, don't like it. So you can say one thing, but we tend to do the exact opposite.
Any other member Mitchell, and then Holloman.
Thank you. So I think that human nature is that people kind of like things the way they have always been. I mean, I like my spaghetti sauce made really oddly because that is the way I was raised. It's the way my mother made it. So to me, that's the right way to do it. And change is difficult for people. I think it's also difficult for board members. I would agree with what Member Bellamy said, that it's really important to if we can visualize what something is really going to look like, and if that vision makes sense, then we can take that out and explain that to people. And some of it is we just have to try it and see how it goes. Sometimes you can't, you just have to trust. But sometimes it's having the time to sit with it, really hear different people describe how it's going to work, wrap our mind it. I think we've all seen that with ourselves and with other people where, you introduce our children, you introduce something and they're like, no. And then maybe it's introduced again a different way, or maybe, somebody else introduces it. And all of a sudden it's become more familiar. They rolled it around in their head. They get it a little bit more. It's been maybe described in a different way that finally clicked. And I think that is true of board members as well. So I guess I would say, I would not completely agree with board member Marsette's characterization of how the board reacted last year. I would say it was not simply due to the testimony. I think it was also due to us really being able to visualize what the change was going to be and how it was going to serve students in hopefully a similar way. So I just think that people need some time and they need maybe different ways of understanding what something is going to look like.
Board Member Holloman.
Well, it is the case we always show up with our own history and frustrations and whatever, but and the testimony matters. If we don't listen to people testify, we could cut that out of the meeting and everything would get a lot more efficient for us, and we'd all have more fun, I think. But the truth is, some people show up and they don't make a lot of sense. Other people show up and they do make a lot of sense. And and I think we're bound to listen and accept all that. But the key thing to me, having spent some time in the classroom, is if you take a program and remove it as a distinct program with people who are advocating for it, and you distribute it among people as now one of several duties. And that to me was the core of how I saw it was happening. It was going to be more efficient, and in that sense, it could reach more people, but also probably be very diluted. We do have a problem. If you have an elementary teacher that really doesn't like math, their students aren't going to be exposed to as much as an elementary teacher who really likes math and who gets it, or science or social studies. I mean, people lean to their strengths. They have more success with a particular topic than another. And counting on each school to have someone that be able to deliver the Ignite program like it had, I think clearly a lot of the success of it had to do with the intensity of it, with the degree to which it was set apart. So I won't say I never make a mistake. I won't say I'm never swayed emotionally. But it is the case, in listening to the testimony, that all made a lot of sense to me. And I wasn't sure there were safeguards that would really protect the integrity of the program going forward. So we are probably doing it in a less efficient way, economically, but one that kind of preserves the core principles of it in a more enthusiastic way. And it's a trade-off. I don't think the program's perfect like it is. I certainly don't think it can't be changed in ways to make it better. But unless we were forced financially, I would hate to see it to where there weren't strong personalities that 100% of their professional lives didn't revolve around it. Because I think you have to have sort of that nuclear core to power the other people that are involved with it for a fraction of their day. And that was really the motivation for my vote. It wasn't that some people are going to be upset and unhappy. That's going to happen no matter what we do. So a lot of times that just kind of comes out in the wash. I think we're not necessarily the education experts, but we are the representatives that the public has chosen to weigh in. Not to say we do exactly what they tell us to, because we can't, and we can't hear from all of them, but we have to evaluate the information we hear. We heard about a program that meant a great deal to lots of people, and keeping it powerful was the impetus behind my vote. It wasn't necessarily keeping it the same, it was keeping it powerful. And unfortunately, that consumes money. So I think we have to be free to go there. And I do think that we have to look at each other and be aware that sometimes board members are influenced when people are upset or angry, and talk to each other about it in a forthright way and try to come to a consensus, ideally, or at least 4 votes in some other way, and be ready to move forward. And we're all going to come from a slightly different place on different days.
Dr. Bishop?
Thank you. And I would just like to share, therein lies our situation. We spend quite a bit of time, and that's okay, to articulate why we voted a certain way last year and why we didn't. In reality, in contrast to the new goals of what we have. A lot of the things that have presented, to Member Holloman's point, I mean, if you had more money and more time, we could spend 2 years studying something to get it done. Education, in a sense, doesn't make changes universally anyway. It takes a long time. Children are in a system for only certain times. They don't get to do grade levels over, so we understand that. We haven't been given the luxury of time or money to adjust. We're making adjustments with the expertise of the employees of our district, utilizing best research, what we can, to move the district forward. The contrast is the people who can come to a meeting versus what Member Marcet suggested, is that the goals to begin with we're an input of the entire community with a vested interest to go to all the 4 square miles of everywhere to hear from people. And the board does say that a lot. Well, we're hearing from people, so we want to listen to them. But there comes a time when the goal, we just have to decide what are the goals for children we decided we wanted to do and how are we going to get there. Most of those times, we will have to take a chance to Member Holloman's point about looking at a program and just kind of trusting. Is it going to diminish the program? Is it not? I'm going to see. But again, I'm just going to reiterate that if we don't act on some of the things that you've asked to act on, you're going to get the same results we've always gotten. And my understanding from the board is that things need to get better for our students. And that's going to be difficult when, I'm just sharing in this time, we're articulating why we voted a certain way or not when we have a future to go to. And I already see the difficulty of what this budget season is going to have. And it's really just, I'm just mirroring back the kind of discussion we're having in regard to the difficulty we're going to have to make changes.
Member Hildy?
I appreciate the point of what are we going to do for this budget? What are we doing? What's our commitment? What are we saying we're going to stand by? What I can say is I'm going to stand by our goals and guardrails, build off what Member Marset did by example in the spring, saying if the budget I feel meets the goals and guardrails, then I'll vote yes. And if I don't, then I'll vote no and send it back to the superintendent. And I can give that clarity and that commitment to you all. And then I expect you to hold me accountable. Member Hildy, you're being a whip now. You said you were going to do something different. So I can give that clarity. I can give the clarity Member Bellamy and Member Mitchell gave on, what can we do? What is possible at this, junction point of education? And, my frustration always I want to be the leader in education, like the world leader. We have the best resource, we have the best teachers. We have the best kids. We should be able to do innovative things. The uniqueness of being a little small, large city, it's just very unique. And I think we have the resources to do things in a different way that does advance student learning, right? The goal is always student learning. So I welcome that. So those are the things I can commit to. Listening to public feedback, right? That's important, as Member Holloman has shared. That is important to say, did our community's values change? Do we need to change our guardrails? Did the pandemic say, but I feel like that's probably not going to come up. It's going to be at kind of the same time. But just going forward, I feel like that's an appropriate thing to do. But also, always, who is not at the table? And so whatever we're talking about, there is always a huge section of people who are not at the table. And my responsibility to represent the entire district, all the children in the district, is to always be asking whose voice isn't being heard in this and to give equal weight to that. So that's my other commitment, I guess.
Yeah. I'm just going to jump in here for a quick second and say I agree with everything that Member Hildy just laid out, and can stand very closely aligned with that. This is the time of year that just is so frustrating because we still have our eyes going backwards at last year. We are knee deep in this year, and we're trying to crystal ball next year, and it is such a hard, difficult time. And this year is the worst I've ever seen it, sitting in a board position seat like this. And so it's going to take an incredible amount of patience and walking the walk and being strong and being supportive and asking questions in a timely manner, making sure that we are continually a part of the process, looking at making sure we are globally representing, all of our kids in our district. We are not like assembly members where we get to, say, I'm only here for, X, Y, and Z. I also need to be here for, A through, X. We have to just think very much like you said, who's not here and who, needs a louder representation. it's really early to start talking about specific and concrete numbers because we don't have those. We don't know what our deficits are going to be this year. We don't have an easy way to predict next year because there's so many moving parts and pieces that even asking the question is, not very fair. But it's probably pretty reasonable to guess it's going to be very, very different than what we have and what we have been for the last few years. So there are going to be things that look different. I'm going to practice patience and a whole lot of kindness, as we go through this process. But I will echo everything that you just said. We are having our broader community talk about our goals and our guardrails. And I think that's where, I will like to, see us start and, work on things. And especially over the next, month, as we talk about it a little later, some of the communication about the goals and the guardrails, and how we're reaching out to the broader section of the community. My head's just so full right now. Member Bellamy, you're up next.
So I just wanted to bring us back to our, from basically what I've heard everybody kind of say, we are committed to our guardrails. Nobody's not committed to them. Our goals and our guardrails, they represent the hopes and dreams of our community. So if we are committed to them, I think that's our number one priority. And I think we are. The other thing that comes up for me is somehow to minimize increase understanding whenever, change is hard, but there has to be a way for us to increase understanding as well as minimize confusion around change. And so, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure how we do that, but it was very clear that, that the staff just did not get what we were trying to do. And I don't know, I don't have an answer. I don't have a magic bullet, but I do think if one of our goals should be to increase understanding around every aspect of the budget. I heard us say we want to, at least some of us, embrace creativity, innovation, and flexibility. And the only other thing I want to add is to just fight like hell for federal and for legislative funding. Because without it, the literacy grant didn't even, or it didn't even make it because of COVID. So we have to also keep in mind that these goals and guardrails were pre-COVID. I'm not saying we can't do them all right now, but I think we might need to think about prioritizing even those at some point, depending on what funding is going, what our funding is going to look like for next year. And we can all fight like hell for funding.
Any other thoughts from board members or the administration? Jim, do you have any thoughts?
Not at this time. Thanks.
Dr. Bishop? Oh, Member Marset?
So, Ms. Bellamy, I appreciate your comment about not knowing the dollars yet. But I think we can still have the conversation of, and I know we want to wait until we get our community input on what their priority would be, but I think we set our goals initially on what we heard from the community. Mm-hmm. And most of, and big percentage of that was reading and how we accomplished that. Mm-hmm. So I think it wouldn't be detrimental, or it wouldn't be a waste of time, even not knowing our budget yet, if we were to say, Dr. Bishop, this is our priority. This is what we want to see in the budget. This is what we don't want to see. Based on our goals and guardrails, what are we going to prioritize? Because then she's going to come back to us once we have the money out there and say, guess what, guys, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. So I don't think it's too early for us as a board, and I'm hoping that our next meeting in November, that we could put this on our agenda and have board members commit to what they feel is the priority for our superintendent. And the reason I say this is because that timeline, the timeline that we get the pro forma in December, the timeline that once we give our priorities, these guys don't have they can't throw it out there in 30 days. You know, they bring together individuals throughout the district, teachers and everyone to get their input on how we can accomplish the board's priorities. So what I would challenge is for each board member to think about what we've said tonight, and that at our November 17th meeting, come prepared to talk about your priority. Is it the goal and guardrails? Is it something else? Is there something you don't want to see touched? That's what I would hope that this board could do. Understanding that we are still seeking community input, but I think given what we have, we can move forward with that.
Did you want to? Okay. Member Mitchell?
Thank you. I have two questions. One is when, Member Marcet, I just can't remember, when were you planning to solicit, or when are we as a board soliciting that community reaction to our drafts? And when were you hoping to have that process wrapped up? And the other question is, I don't know, this is a question I just don't remember. Did we have our goals, number 1, number 2, number 3. The first one is reading, the second one is math, and the third one is career or college-ready graduates. Are those in rank order, or are they equally weighted?
Right now, equally weighted.
I'll just touch it. They are not ranked. They're all the goals, but I think you can say there is a ranking to it. If you're going to put 80% on reading and 55%, if you're saying do this big of growth here and this big of growth here, there is a priority aspect to that. If you're going to divide the work up over 5 years, potentially, but I don't see it as a ranking.
Well, and this is something that I had asked about when we were putting such aggressive goals in there is, are we going to be reallocating resources to the detriment of our current secondary students? Because, to me, they're now, they're not in K through 3, they're in 7th or 9th or 12th grade. And anyway, yeah. So I would like to think that our college ready and career ready goal is equally important, but that gives Dr. Bishop not a whole lot of guidance. So
Member Marcet?
But Mitchell or Dina, it does give her guidance. So thank you for that, because that's exactly what we're looking for. I mean, if you're saying, yes, we want to, and I misspoke. They're not rated as readings number 1, as Hildy said, with the percentages, that's just kind of what I look at. It's our job as a board to decide based on the community, what is the priority that's most important to us? What is the guardrail that's most important to us? Because we can't do everything at once. And if you're saying we don't want secondary to suffer, or our college, our middle college, or those type of things, that is input. That is exactly what the superintendent needs to hear. To know that these are things that are important to the board. Yes, we have a priority. These are things that are important to the board to be able to move forward. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Member Holloman?
Yeah, I know I have said this inelegantly a couple of different ways, so I'll try again. This one may flop too. When we had to delay a return after spring break, some of us were thinking, well, we might be back in school before the end of the year. And then it turned out we realized that wasn't possible. I think a lot of us felt like we probably would be back in August. Things changed. We couldn't be. I think we were still hopeful we would, quote, resume in October, and the presence of COVID in the community started to rise. We couldn't be. To some degree, I think we're looking at a possible return of pre-K through 2 without fully comprehending that even if we come back on that limited basis, it may be somewhat erratic. And that what we've seen in Natsu and what we've seen in the Kenai are buildings having to close, individuals having to be isolated. So this comes to the budget for next year, as I do think we probably are going to have to redesign education in a really fundamental way in a world that in particular students may not show up as regularly. Just recently, one of our goals was 90% attendance by 90% of the kids. That in a world that has COVID in it, that really can't be a goal anymore. Unless something remarkable happens with a vaccine. We have to really think about students being part of a class that they may have to take breaks from, or the teacher may have to take breaks from, or 3 or 4 or 5 of the kids may have to take breaks from. And we still want to have them be a cohesive unit. We still want that class to have some meaning to the students in terms of being part of a community and working with other kids. And we normally count on them being there to make it happen. And if they're not there, we try to figure out, well, what can we do to get you there more often? We're entering a phase where we may, that may not be what we want, that we have to figure out how to keep them part of the group when they can't be there physically. And I do think as we do that, some people are going to take advantage of it to live a different lifestyle, in the same way that I think all of us understand Zoom meetings are going to be part of the future. Even if COVID went away tomorrow, remote meeting participation would be a thing on into the future because it's made us start it. It works in some ways. This thing of being able to educate kids, even if they're not in a particular room, has some advantages to it. And I think it's going to stay with us. So I'm not so much concerned in the coming year about particular reading scores for specific groups and such. I'm really more concerned that we reimagine how we run school on a day-to-day basis in a way that someone suddenly has to be out for 2 weeks. It doesn't derail them in the way that it has traditionally. And I think that's a huge lift. I think that's asking more than anyone can expect from an administration and from the leadership to design. But we have to start moving that way. And it's such a huge thing. I don't know that we can have a lot of other goals in the short term. And when I brought this back up, I'm not saying the goals we have don't matter. They do. We want to get back to them. And as a 5-year goal or something further out, it may still make sense. But the truth is, we suddenly have got to really change that. We're not going to have a normal end of this year. The second semester is not going to be a normal semester. We've got to start making changes that let us still function in an efficient way with all this disruption and with this level of illness out in the world. So that'll be something I harp on a little bit more as we are looking at the budget and looking at our goals. We have to do everything better in a world where attendance suddenly isn't something that we can set as a goal in and of itself.
All right, I'm not seeing any other board members with their hands raised or administration with hands raised. I do feel like this has been a good conversation, a good introduction to the budget process and kind of where some of us stand. I think we needed just a little bit more time than a finance committee meeting to just kind of start getting some of these thoughts out. And so I'm very appreciative of everybody for participating in the conversation. Obviously, this is going to be a continued process. with a lot of moving parts and pieces, and especially as information rolls out and we get there. All right, gave everybody that pregnant pause, so still no hands up or anything like that. Okay, Dr. Bishop.
Well, thank you. And also the discussion in regard to, the board is moving forward some policies as well that are expected, if they're new, to be followed as well. So those would also take into account the overall planning and budgeting to meet policy guidelines by the board. So it is policy and it is goals. Some of the policies around equity, or if we have our health policy with students, whether it's recess food, all that, those, just to keep in mind that those also are implications for changes in procedures, processes, as well as possible budgeting as well.
Thank you. So next up on our agenda is new business, although I don't have any, but it's just a placeholder, on a work session for new business. If there's anything new that board members would like to, pose or, start to have a discussion about, this is an informal place to do so. I haven't heard anything from other board members, so it'll be there next time. After that comes up board RFIs, requests for information. I have not received any new ones. I've seen, a couple little questions get, short ones get fielded, through Dr. Bishop, but they're not any of the big ranking RFIs that we have talked about in the past. And I think if it is okay, if there are no objections by the board, probably not to dig back into this one quite yet, just because with everything going on with the administration, I think there's probably, very little to zero bandwidth to handle some of these right now. Anything that is pertinent to discussions, that we're currently having, I think they're, working on. But from the last time I looked at the RFIs, I don't believe there's anything absolutely imminent that we need right now. So if there's no objection, we'll just not touch on that. But and so what that also does is bring us to the end of our work session. It is 4:30. We had debated an hour and a half, but we gave 2 hours, not knowing how the discussion would go. And so that does leave us a little bit of time to probably stretch and do whatever we need to do before a 5 o'clock work session. And we're going to have a long night. So I encourage all sorts of, everything. Member Marset?
So I think it's prudent to, and maybe I kind of missed my chance to do this, but there is a lot of social media talk out there right now. And some of it is appropriate. Some of it, I think, board members might be stretching. But I think they're talking about board business when maybe, I just think the line is pretty, I'm not good with sayings, but it's close. It's close. So I guess I would just, especially during this time when there's so much controversy going on, that we just be careful what we're saying in social media. And this is really, really weighed heavy on my mind. And I'm just going to say it that I've never worked anywhere, nor have I known any other business where an employee can go out and call their boss a liar and not face retribution or, and I just have to say I'm very disappointed in certainly not the majority, but in some of our employees that feel that that's a necessity to do that. So as a board member, I'm going to say I'm very disappointed in our staff that are doing that, and that I would hope they would rethink how they're posting things. It's good to have an opinion. It's good to share that opinion. But when it comes down to calling names and other things, I think that is not appropriate. And as a board member, I feel I have a right to voice that opinion. So thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Hildy?
If for helpful reminder, there's like a little poster teachers put up for think before you speak. T, is it true? H, is it helpful? I, is it inspiring? N, is it necessary? And K, is it kind? So as a board, we can model those things too, right? Is it inspiring? Is it helpful? Is it kind? We can encourage people who teach those things because we're all going to make mistakes, but we can also say, is that true what you're saying? Or is that a rumor you heard? And does that rumor stop with you? So I thank Member Marset for that, and I encourage us all to model that as best as we can and encourage one another to model that.
Thank you. It's all right. Our board secretary, Katie, has her hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to reach out to Member Donnelly that after we adjourn the work session, if he wouldn't mind staying on, I would have some technical support for him for his camera. That they will give him a call, but they asked that he stayed joined to this meeting and so that they can help.
Katie, did you hear me? I'll stay on.
Thank you, Member Donnelly.
Perfect. So next up is adjournment, but it is an adjournment to an executive session. And Ms. Margot, do you have the language to do that motion? Well, we do it in this meeting so that even though we're not going to go until 5, but we do it in this meeting.
Yeah. I think I move that we adjourn and for the purpose of moving into executive session.
For the purposes of?
For the purpose of student hearings and negotiations.
Perfect. Do I have a second?
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. If there are no objections, we will move into executive session, and it will start at 5 for folks that are joining the executive session. Thank you.
Thank you.